Hey, welcome to building a brand new application with Python. For this application, we have a topic where Python really shines, and that is browser automation or web automation, which consists of automating actions on a website. So for this particular example, for our app, we will build a program which goes to this website and then it logs in using a username and password. You can create a new user for free on this website. This website is for testing and building such web automation programs, so you can create new users easily. And so the program will log in here. These are my credentials. So I'm doing what the program will do automatically. So the program will fill in the data, will press the login button automatically, then it will go to click this drop-down element, go to text box, and then it will fill in the full name, the email, the current address, the permanent address, and then press on submit. And then it will go to this button, upload and download, and it will download a file which is a JPG file, and it will save that file in the local directory, in the project directory. So all that will happen in a split of a second. Now let me demonstrate you what exactly we will build. It's this one. So the program will also have a graphical user interface, as you can see here. So the user can enter the username and their password for that particular website, and then fill in the data so that these data will go to the form I just showed you in here, right? And then we can press submit, and by pressing submit, let's see what will happen. Let me close the browser. So I'll press submit, and everything will happen in a split of a second. So you see the data were submitted, and also the image file was downloaded, and it's here on another window on my computer. So everything happened in a split of a second. You don't even see it. And this can be useful now for many scenarios. So let's say you have people who want to submit data in a tax portal, for example, and these are routine data. So you can create such graphical user interfaces, such tools to give to users. Of course, you can get the data from a CSV file. It depends on the scenario. And then Python will submit those data to the website. Now, what's the difference between this and web scraping? Well, this uses a library called Selenium. Web scraping usually uses Beautiful Soup. The difference is that with browser automation, you are mimicking a real user. It's just like going to the browser and typing in everything and pressing the button. So there are scenarios where you really need to use browser automation. Web scraping is usually for extracting lots of data from a website without even opening the browser. And so web scraping is a bit more limited. With browser automation, so with Selenium, you can do more things, such as is the case here, where we log in and we fill in the data, we press a button and so on. So we will have two parts. In the first videos, we will write the script without the graphical user interface, without this, just a command line based program, and then we will create a user interface. And then in the last video, we will create a graphical user interface. So, ready? Let's begin with the next video. Hi, in the previous video I mentioned that we will build a browser automation tool with Python, and to do that we need three things. First, you need Google Chrome on your computer, so please install Google Chrome if you don't have it. Second, you need a tool called Chrome Driver, which I'll show you how to install in this video. And then you need Selenium, which is a Python library. So Selenium will use Chrome Driver to open Google Chrome. That's how it works. So let's install Chrome Driver. You can search for Chrome Driver on Google and then go to the first result, which is developer.chrome.com/docs/Chrome Driver/downloads. Now, in this page, it says that if you're using Chrome version 1.15 or newer, which is probably the case. You can check that in the settings, in the help about Google Chrome. So my version is 128, so that's newer than 115. Therefore, I can click on this link here, Chrome for Testing Availability Dashboard page. And you can scroll down to the stable section. Now, here we have links for Google Chrome, but that's not what we need. We are installing Chrome driver, so you want to see these rows here. And you want to locate your operating system, for example, Mac Silicon. You need that link. You can copy that and paste it there, and a file will be downloaded for Windows 64. You want to copy that, visit the link. So then you want to extract that zip file. So that's the zip file that I downloaded, and I extracted it and I got this directory. So this folder contains 3 files inside. One of them is called Chrome driver. This is what we need, but don't change anything. You want to copy that folder with the files inside and go to your IDE. So I've created a new project in PyCharm, and I'll paste that folder just in the project directory. Now, take care not to put it inside venv. So you see venv and Chrome driver are outside of each other, so they are both located in the root directory of my project. Once you do that, you need to install Selenium. So I have venv activated, so I can do pip install Selenium. You can use a virtual environment or not, it depends on your preference. So Selenium was installed successfully. Now let's make a quick test to see if Chrome driver works correctly. So I'll create a Python script. Let's call this main.py. We need to import from Selenium, which is the library we just installed, import WebDriver. WebDriver is the main object we will use here. And then we also need a service object, which comes from selenium.webdriver.chrome.service, imports service with an uppercase S, and then we will create a service object coming from this class service, and here is where we declare the path to the directory which contains Chrome driver. In my case, that's this. So that's the directory name, and then you need to add a slash and then point to Chrome driver. Chrome driver is the executable file located inside that folder. So you need to give the entire path to the Chrome driver file, right? Then that is the service object instance. Then you need to create a driver object instance. So create a new variable, name it driver, but don't name it WebDriver, because this name is already occupied by this submodule. So please use driver. That is equal to WebDriver.Chrome. Chrome is a class which we need to call, and this gets a service argument which is equal to a service. Now here you also need to be careful. Service is this variable, but don't name it service with a capital S, because you're pointing to the class. So service with uppercase is the class, while service with lowercase is the instance pointing to our actual Chrome driver. And then finally, we need to do driver.get, and here is the website we need to load. In our case, it is https demoqa.com/login. This is the web page that looks like this, but now Python will open it automatically if I run this. But let's also quit the driver, and in between here I can just add an input function. This is optional, you can say press enter to close the browser. You'll see what this does. Let's run the script. So that opened Google Chrome and it loaded this web page. Now, if you see a window on top of the web page asking you to select a default search engine, don't worry, we will add an option in the next video which disables that window so that you can get the web page directly just like you saw it in here in the video. Now, normally the browser will open and close by default, but because we entered this input function, the driver.quit line has not been executed yet. So you can press enter here and that will execute driver.quit, and now Chrome has closed. So the browser now is not open anymore. So without that, if I comment this out, I run it, the browser opens and then closes immediately. So if your script opened the browser, that means you successfully installed Chrome driver and you successfully set it up here in the script. So that means we're ready to go to the next lesson where I'll show you how to log in to that website. So see you in the next video. Welcome back. In the previous video we installed Chrome driver and Selenium and we created an initial script, and now we will build into this script. So this script simply opens the browser automatically pointing to that URL. Now sometimes you may get a window on top of this which asks you to manually select a search engine. We can avoid that window by adding options. Options is a class which we need to import from selenium.webdriver. So it's the same syntax of imports.chrome.options, import options with an uppercase O, and then before we even create a service, we create some options, which is equal to, well, let's write this Chrome options, since we have that options name there. So we will call the options class just like that without any arguments, but then we will point to that variable we just created, dot add argument. The argument will be a string and it should be dash dash, so minus minus disable minus search minus engine minus choice minus screen. So that window which we are stopping from opening is known as the search engine choice screen. So we created options, we added an argument to that, but we need to connect options to the driver. To do that, we need to add another argument. Options is equal to Chrome options, comma. So the driver gets two arguments, options and the service. Now, if I run this, it will work same as before. So if you were getting that window, you shouldn't get it now anymore. Let's continue. Our goal in this video is to log in to that website. So the website has this username and passwords fields, and you need to create a new user account. So please press on that button first. Get your username and passwords, and then you may want to test it manually first. So try to log in and you should see this web page. So if you see that, that means you have created a user account. So that's my username. Now we will do the same. So we will perform a login operation using Python. So let's go back to our code and add the code to do the login. Now, the login will consist of three parts. So first, we will write some code which locates the username field and the password field. So the script has to be intelligent to know where these are. So that's the first part. The second part is some code which will fill in these with text. So the actual username and the actual password. And third, the script will locate and also press the login button. So three blocks of code. Let's start with the first one, locating the username and password fields. So we will write that code in between here. We do the options, so we declare the options, we start the service, we start the driver, so that opens the page, and then we do the login. Now, for the script to know where the username and password are, you need to tell the script the location, and to do that you need to go to Google Chrome and go to inspect. So you need to click over that field, go to inspect, and then try to zoom in the browser to expand it. And now here you have the code that builds this web page. So that's HTML code. Every element is constructed using some particular lines here. Now this here username is known as an input HTML element. So I can see it here. Let me zoom in a bit. So the idea is that we need to find a unique feature this element has among the other elements so that we can tell the script to find that particular element among all these. Because the script, actually, the Python file, the Python program reads this code. It doesn't see the visuals. The visuals is for humans. The code will see this code. So the idea is something unique, which other elements don't have it. So username. So I want to copy that ID. So you see it's a property of the input element. And I go to the script. I create a string. Use single quotes for this, because sometimes these elements have like double quotes inside, so use single quotes. Now this, we will pass it to a function, and it works like this. Let's write it here. We need to import that function from Selenium webdriver.support.ui import webdriver weight, and then we say webdriver weight driver, which is this variable, comma 10, so this gets two arguments. 10 means 10 seconds, but I'll cover that in just a bit. Dot until dot ec, this is something we also need to import from selenium.webdriver.support import expected conditions SEC. So that's short for this. Expected conditions dot visibility of element located. Now, as argument here, we'll give a tuple. So write two other parentheses, and inside the parentheses, we do by dot ID, and then the other argument, the other element of the tuple, so this is a tuple, the other element is that ID, like that. And you need to import by as well. This is the last import we do for the entire program. So from selenium.webdriver.common.by import by with an uppercase B. And then we store all that in a variable. Let's say username field. So let me explain that line to you. What it means is that the program will open a web page, right? And then the program waits a maximum of 10 seconds. It waits until this field loads, because sometimes some elements of a web page takes some milliseconds. Usually it's milliseconds to load, and the program can be faster than the speed of the web page loading. So with this we say, okay, wait 10 seconds, because more than that is not meaningful to wait any longer. But if the field is displayed before 10 seconds, this code is executed successfully and it goes to the next line. So normally this line will be executed in a split of a second, and then the next line will be the password field. It's basically the same code. So I'll copy that code, and this will be, we need to find that out, just like we did for username. So you can scroll down like this, you see you allocate the div that can expand it and go here, expand. So the input is inside division elements, or you can just go here directly, click on password, right click, go to inspect, and that will highlight the element. So I can see that the ID for this is password here, password. So go to the script and just write here password. Right, so this simply locates the elements and stores the element objects in these variables. So these are specialized objects in Selenium, and then you can point to each of those objects and apply the sendKeys method. So this kind of object has this method, and this method now will type in text in those fields. So this would be my username for that web page, and I'll duplicate that, and password field dot send keys, that would be my password 123 and this. And with that we can execute. Yeah, so this is what happened. The web page was loaded, the username and password fields were filled in with text, and now we're ready to press in the login button. So let's do that in the script. You write the lines after the other, but before these two last lines always. However, it makes sense to create the login button element here, just like we did with these. Actually, I'll add some comments. Define driver options. Actually, I'll group the service and the driver definition in here. So define driver, comma options and service. Basically, we're doing the setup here, and then here we say load the web page, right? And then locate username, password and the login button, and then fill in username and password. So there we have nice sections of code. The login button, you can use the same code like this in here and try to locate the ID. So you need to go to the browser again. So we're here, right click on login. So that's a button HTML element, and the ID is login. So you can simply change that to login, right? And then fill in username and password and click the button. So let's add that code here, and then point to login button dot. This time we don't use send keys, we use click, this method. Just like that, and let's execute. So the button was apparently clicked successfully, but my username is not correct. Sorry about that. It's actually Python student. So let's try again. Yes, so this time the login was successful. Now, sometimes you may get an error, so if that is the case, I'll show you the solution. Because sometimes Google Ads on the page may intercept with the button, so your program, instead of clicking the button, will be clicking the ads. It happens every now and then, so I'm trying to execute it. Maybe it will happen. Yes, now it happened. So here is the error I was talking about. If I scroll up, it says here's a message. Message element click intercepted, element button ID. It's not clickable because other element would receive the click, and that's an ad because the page is dynamic and it's showing new ads all the time. We can fix that though. To fix that, instead of using WebDriver wait, you use driver.findElement, just one pair of parentheses. Inside find element, you should provide two arguments, by ID and comma the ID of the button, which was login. And then to click the button, you don't do this, but you do driver.execute script, use quotes and say arguments, plural, square brackets 0 inside the square brackets dot click, and then a semicolon, like that. So again, this is the code, arguments 0 dot click parentheses semicolon, and everything is in quotes, double quotes or single quotes. This here is actually JavaScript code. So we are executing JavaScript code with Python to avoid that error. If I run this again to make sure it's working just like before, we get an error which says JavaScript error cannot read properties of undefined. Well, that's because I forgot to add the other argument here, which is the element we want to click, so login button. Otherwise, the driver will not know where to execute that JavaScript. So let's execute again. Here we go. So the login is successful. And that concludes this video. So that is the full script on loading the web page, locating the username, password and login button, filling in the data in those username and password fields, clicking the button, and then we quit the driver here. In the next video, we will go and click on some elements inside the web page and fill in a form. See you in the next video. Hey, welcome back to another video where I'll show you how to automatically fill in a form with Selenium. Now, some aspect of this will be the same as when we filled in the username and password, but there will be some new things which you will learn. Let me show you what exactly we'll do. Currently the script simply logs in to the website. So this is a dashboard after the user logs in. Then we will write some code now, which clicks on this elements drop down. So this is something new. You'll see how we can implement this. And then the program will click on text box. That shows a form here, HTML form. The program will fill in these data and then it will press submit to send these data to the web server. As we mentioned, this is a typical scenario of using Selenium when you want to send data to some website. So let's implement this. So here we are. Well, we have this existing code. So we fill in the username and password and click the button to log in. And then in here, we will locate the elements drop down. So to expand it, as I just showed you, I'll show you again. So that will be some code there. Then we'll locate the form elements or the form fields. So locate elements drop down and text box. There was also a text box element there. Let me show that again, what I mean. So elements, text box, and then fill in the data. So elements, text box, allocate the form fields, fill in the form fields. That's pretty much it. So let's write the code. Let's call this elements. That would be equal to WebDriver. I'll copy this code in here. And now we need to locate the ID of that element. So I mean this. You can click over that, go to inspect. And now this is a bit tricky here because you need to locate the actual element. So I had to do an inspect for a second time so that it tells me where that is. So there are different hierarchies that enclose that element division. So it's this one, but then you can go deeper, and here it's a span, but you don't want the span, you don't want this, you want the outer one, the outer div, so this div in here. Let's expand this. So this is div class header wrapper, but it doesn't have an ID. In that case, what we do is in the code, we change this by ID to by XPath. And now we need to get the XPath from this div by right-clicking there, going to copy and then copy XPath. So that should copy some text on your keyboard, and you paste that text within single quotes. So that's the argument. I'll split the code here because it's too long, and also here. Well, that's not necessary, so that's the code. And then we can click elements using a click method. And let's execute. So log in. And so elements was clicked successfully. We can see that these expanded. So this is without clicking it, and this is by clicking it. So if I remove this, actually, if I don't click it, you'll see the difference. You see, elements now is collapsed. So we want it like this, therefore we want to click it. So let's keep the click there. So right, so first step is completed. Now we need to locate the text box. So we need to locate it and click here. So we do the same, go to inspect, and that is, let's do inspect again to highlight that. So there we go. This is a span, but we want above that. So the outer one is the li element. It's a list element, right? And it has an ID of item -0. So with that in mind, I will copy this code here. Let's say text box is that. By ID, it was item -0, right? Now, if you have an issue with an intercept error like I showed you previously, so that happens sometimes when you have this WebDriver wait, then you can change this code to this style. So you can use that instead of this style. So using driver.findElement by ID, item -0, and then use this to click it in case you get that error. So text box, and then we click on text box using a click method. Let's try this. Log in. Yes, so text box was clicked, and we know that because we see the form displayed here. So next is we want to fill in the form. And to do that, we basically will do the same thing as we did with locating username and password. So I'll just copy that code again, and we have full name. So let's say full name underscore field, and then we have email. So let's duplicate this email field, and then we have current address field, and lastly permanent address field. And all we have to change here now are the IDs. So let's get the IDs from here. Click on full name, go to inspect, and then So it's here. It has an ID of username. So that's the same like the ID of the other field, but the username field where we log in, but that's okay because it's another page, so there's no clashes there. Let's go to email, inspect. The ID is email, so let's change this to email. And then we have current address with an ID of current address. Current capital A address. Like that. And lastly, permanent address. Permanent address. Right, so we have located these. Let's also locate the button, the submit button. So let's add the comments and submit button, which is this one in here. Let's inspect. It has an ID of submit, so I will copy this code. So I'm using driver.find element for buttons because I also experienced an issue, an intercept error with this, so I'm using this alternative with that, with this submit button. So it was submit the ID. So by ID submit. And that's it. That's about locating the elements. Now we need to fill in these elements. And to do that, we use this code. So basically we point to each element like full name fields.send keys and then send the text, for example, John Smith as the full name. And then next is email field, send keys. Now this has to be in a proper email format using an @ for example, john@gmail.com. Next is current address field. Let's say John Street 100, New York, USA. And then finally, permanent address field. Let's keep it the same. And then we need to press the button with this code as we used previously. So driver.execute script, this JavaScript code, and here it has to be the submit button. Let's execute. This is what happens. And the form was not filled in. Let's check why. Oh, there is an error here. In this line, in the email element, perhaps the ID is not correct, so let's check again. So let's go to the website, elements, text box, email. Let's inspect. Also, the ID is user email. Sorry about that. So user email. Let's run again. And it seems to be successful this time. So the data were typed in successfully, and then the button was pressed successfully. I know that because I can see the data here. So if you see the data printed out in here, that means the website received your data and it gave you some sort of confirmation here by printing out the data on the web page. So that is how you submit data with Selenium to a web server. Next, we're going to go to this page and download that JPG file, which is a sample file. Let's do that in the next video. Hi again. In this video, I'll show you how to use Selenium to download a file. The script so far opens the browser, logs into the website, fills in the form, submits the form. Next, we want to click on upload and download this section here. So this is already expanded. So we can simply get the ID or the XPath of this. So it's this one in here. We want to get not the span but the LI. So the ID is item 7, right? And then we want to get the download button ID as well, which is, so this has an A element, the button. So you want to click on the A element and see the ID, it's download button. So item -7 and download button. These are the two IDs. Let's go to the code and we're looking at here. So let's say locate the upload and download section and the download button. Let's use the same code more or less as we used with elements and with the other widgets as well. So this will be upload, download, and well, this has an ID, so I'll just use the ID, and it was item -7. I'll just write it in one line, and then upload and download dot click. So let's test it. So there we can see the upload and download page. That means that section was clicked successfully. So let's do the same with the button. So that would be the same as this submit button. So let's put it here and then we execute it. So that was download button, if I'm not wrong. Let's check again. So it was an A tag download button. Yeah, that's correct. And here, oh, let's name this variable download button, and then the same goes here. So here we locate it and here we click that button. So locate it, click it. Locate that download section, click that download section. Let's execute. Right, so a file was downloaded, JPG, an image file. The problem is this file is downloaded in my downloads folder in my computer. If that's okay, you can leave it as it is. If you want the file to be downloaded in your project directory, then you need to add some options here on the top of the script. Let's do that in here after declaring the options, but before declaring the service and the driver. The way we do this is by creating a dictionary of preferences first. We need to declare some predefined strings such as download.default directory, and we'll send this dictionary to the options. So this is a pair of key and value. Now the value should be the directory where you want to save the downloaded files. So by default that is in the downloads folder on your computer, but we can change this to this current directory. To get the current directory, you need to import os, and then you can either do here os.get current directory methods, or you can better do it here. Let's say download path is os.get current directory. This code, by the way, let me explain you what that does. Let me open a Python shell. So import os.get cwd, which stands for current working directory. So get current working directory, it will give you the complete full path of your project directory. You see app15 browser automation Selenium, which is this directory here where I have my main.py file. So that will be stored there, so I can just pass that in here as a value for this key. So now we have a prefs dictionary, and To add that to the options, we access the Chrome options variable, which points to the options object instance. Add experimental option, it works with this for now. Prefs, a string, prefs, a variable. So you need to give two arguments. First, you are saying that you are passing the preferences, and then the preferences are stored in this dictionary, right? And then you add those options to Chrome, so we don't change this code, but make sure that these lines are defined before you define the driver. Now I can run the script again. So log in. Let's check the working directory. Yep, there we go. A sample file.jpg is added to my project directory. So that's how you download files with Selenium. And that's a complete script. So if I want to stop to close the browser, I can press enter in the command line. That means this is executed, and that means next this is executed after we press enter. So the driver quits and the browser closes. In a more real world scenario, you don't have to write this, so you can comment this out, because normally you just want to submit the data and you want the browser to close by itself. So it depends on what the user wants. Now, this is the command line based program, but if you want to follow the next video, we will build a graphical user interface which looks more or less like this. The user will enter the password in here, the username, fill in the data for the form, and press the button to do everything that we do by executing this will be done by that submit button. So the benefit of this is that it is more user-friendly, obviously, because the user doesn't have to go through your script to enter the username and password. Or you can also change this to an input function and allow the user to enter those data here in the command line. That's another option, but a graphical user interface is always more user-friendly than having to enter data in the command line. So let's see how we can implement this in the next video. Thanks. Hi. As you know, we created a Python program which automates actions on a website. Now we will build a graphical user interface for this script. So currently this doesn't have a graphical user interface, simply opens the browser and performs the actions. But before we build the graphical user interface, we want to refactor this code. What does refactoring mean? Refactoring means changing the structure of the code without changing its behavior. So the behavior is this, what the code does. So opening the website, logging in, filling in the form, etc. We don't want to change that. So refactoring is about changing the organization, the structure of the code. Because currently the code follows a procedural programming paradigm, which means that things happen line by line. So we don't have any functions and we don't have any classes. So the code is executed in a linear order. Like, for example, the driver starts the web page, then we locate the username fields. Once those lines are executed, then it's the next line, filling in the fields, and so on. This is not useful when you want to connect the code with a graphical user interface, because you want that interface to control when a certain line should be executed. So when the button is pressed, then these lines should be executed. So for that, we need to refactor this code and put these into functions or classes. It depends. So we should either choose to go with functional programming paradigm or object-oriented programming paradigm. So either put this into functions or classes, which is the object-oriented programming paradigm. So let's refactor this code using classes. So object-oriented programming paradigm. So the way that this will work is Later we'll create a Python file and name it something like GUI.py, and this will contain the graphical user interface code. We will use tkinter for this, and so in here we will call the classes of the other file. So let's create classes and then we call them from here. So in this video, let's create the classes. All we need actually is just one class, web automation, for example. And that will have several methods in it first, and then log in second, and then fill form third, and finally close last. So each of these methods will be responsible for certain actions. Let's start with init. Init is usually to initialize a class to define the initial parameters. So in this case, that would be just to defining the options. So define the driver, the options and the service, like the download path as well. So let's get those also and just place them here. So these should be indented under init. Oh, we also need a method for downloading. So download. What else can we put here? Well, these two also. So the service and the driver definition. So these also go here. And yeah, that's it. Now login. Logging in means going to the website. So we put this inside login. So the driver get that opens the browser and opens this website on the browser, right? And then what else? Well, we have these. So locating the username field, password field, the login button, filling in these fields with a username and password, and then pressing the login button. So that is a responsibility of the login method. Now we will change these into arguments for the login method. So instead of hard coding them here, we should do them in here as arguments, a username, password, and then change that to username and password. And then when the GUI file is executed, here we will have some code which will get the username and password from the GUI fields and send them to this method. Next, fill in the form. So that would be all these lines. We'll go here, fill in the form, and lastly the code for downloading that goes here. We don't need the input function, and finally driver.quit goes here. Right, that's for now, but we need to change some things here to make this work because currently, let's test it. So the way to test this code is working is having the same behavior as the previous code is by initializing the class. So let's say web automation is equal to web automation, the class, and it doesn't need any arguments. So the init method doesn't get any argument. This is a default special self argument which you don't pass. If we had other arguments here, we would have to pass them in here, but that's not the case, so that's all we do. Then web automation.login. So we call the methods now one by one. Username and password. So for username we had Python student. For password we had Python student 123 and this $. Then web automation dot fill form. Oh, this also needs some arguments. So instead of hard coding these in here, we can pass them as arguments. So that is full name email current address permanent address, like that. And yeah, replace them here. Full name, email, current address, and permanent address. So let's call them here, John Smith, john@gmail.com, and I'll just say street 1, keep it short, street 2, that's it. Filling form, and lastly, web automation.download, and then web automation.close to close the driver. That's the idea, and then we can put this inside a conditional. If name is equal to main, we execute this. I'm doing this because this way, when we write the graphical user interface, this code will not be executed, because when this GUI.py file imports this, it executes this code, so it defines a class, but it doesn't execute everything that is under this conditional. However, when I execute the code as the main script, this is executed. So that's a trick to control these lines of code. Now, we will get tons of errors here because we need to define some attributes. So this is an error driver.get. Driver is not defined, and this is in line 24. So in login, driver is not defined because driver has been defined in another method, but that driver exists only in the scope of this method. So we cannot have access. We don't have access to that variable from another method. So because this method doesn't have access to that driver, we can expose that to make it an attribute of the class. So now self means the class itself, right? The object instance. So by doing that, you say driver is part of self, and every method has access to self. Therefore, here you can say self.driver to access that value. But then you have to do it in every occurrence in that method. So a better way to do that is to right-click over driver within the login method. Right-click, go to refactor. This is if you're using PyCharm, and go to introduce field and press enter first, and then replace all occurrences and retype that to self.driver. However, you need to delete the first line. So this line was added self.driver.equals to driver. So remove that. And that's replace every driver with self-driver. And we need to do the same with fill form. So locate a driver. The first one is here. Go to refactor, introduce field. In this case, it cannot be done because it's as an argument, so we can do it manually, self.driver. Try to find it in other places. If it is, yeah, it's here also at the end. Otherwise, you'll get an error and you'll be able to fix it, so don't worry. And here we have another one in the download method. Same here, self.driver. Yep, that's it. So let's run again, see what's next. And this time we got this. Driver is not defined in line 41. Also, we have one more here. So let's change that. Line 41, it's inside the fill form method. Let's run again. Another one, 45. Oh yeah, we have a few here. Self.driver, self.driver, self.driver. Same here. and another one 51. And oh, this time we have this error with intercept, which I covered before in the previous videos. So this is happening with one of the items with ID item 7. You can fix that, as I mentioned, by changing this to the other style of the code, but that's another subject. So change it to this style. But if you run it again, next time probably it will not happen. It depends. Oh, this time we line 65, so we have another self to add. I guess this is the last one. Oh, also in close. Right. So now it was successful. And the browser opened and it was very quick actually. It filled in the form, did everything right, downloaded the file, and then it closed. It closes because we have this close method, so it executes once the automation ends. We can control that in the GUI with a button. So when the button is pressed, then this is executed. So these lines here are just for testing this code, and it seems to be working fine. So that means we're ready to go to the next step and build the GUI, and the GUI will call these methods just like we did here. So this is a proper way to develop a program. So you write classes and then you write another layer like a GUI or a web interface which will use those methods. Let's do this in the next video. See you. Welcome back to a last video where we will build a graphical user interface for our web automation script. So this is exactly what we'll build. I'll just make a screenshot of this and keep it here just for quick reference. So the way this program works is obviously the user can fill in the username and password they need to log in for the program to log in automatically to the website, and then fill in this data which will be sent in one of the forms on the website. Then the user presses submit and everything is executed. So the login is automatically executed, the submission of the data and the downloading of a file. We'll do that with Tkinter. Feel free to use any other libraries. I had to choose Tkinter, is the most popular one, the most straightforward. So we had to choose something. So import Tkinter as TK. This is the standard practice to keep it short. And to be consistent with the other script which does the automation, I'll use classes here as well. So class app, define init. So we will create this class, and then at the end we will call that class, will instantiate it using app like that. And for that we need to create a root first, a root window with tk.tk with Tkinter, and pass that root in here, and then the same here, root. So we create a root window for the GUI, and we pass that window here, that object here, and that is passed in here, and that will be used by all the methods in this class then. So for example, we'll have a submit data method, we'll have a define close browser methods. You can also have a download a button, but I'll keep it simple and just have that functionality inside the submit data method. So inside init, we will create every initial step which builds the graphical user interface, so the widgets. That starts from defining a self.root is equal to root, so to expose that as an attribute. So now we get root from here, we pass it here, we pass it here, and then we pass it to here. So now root, the window, is stored in self.root. That means we can access it from submit data here. But let's focus on init first. So self.root.title, we give a title to the GUI web automation GUI, for example, and we can execute it just to see what we've got so far. Oh, I forgot to do root.main loop here at the end. And yeah, this is the window. So now let's add widgets. The widgets, it makes sense to add them in the init method. Why? Because init is executed when we create the app instance. So this line here executes init. And so initially, we want the user to see all the widgets: the username field, the password field, the submit data button, the close browser button. And to be able to do that, you need to write that code inside init. So that's like the initialization of the app. Therefore, let's create a login frame attribute. Assign it to a frame. We'll use a frame and point to self.root and then self.loginFrame.pack. So this is a method to define some padding around the frame. So the frame will contain everything, basically all the widgets. Pad X, pad Y, both are equal to 10 pixels. And then we create things like label, and everything now is referring to that self.loginFrame, which we just created in here. So this will be the first label, will be for username. Let's keep this open to the right. So just there, that's a screenshot. So the text of username is just username, a variable, a string, sorry. And then you can apply .grid here. Row is equal to 0 and column is equal to 0 as well. Sticky is equal to west, which means keep it to the left. So let's keep it like this. If I run this, we get this. So username. Let's add more, and these parameters will make more sense to you. So let's ignore what this means for now. So then we need tk.entry. Let's store this in a self.entry username variable. So an attribute. I didn't do the same for this because we'll not reuse this label anywhere else, but for this we'll refer to this username field because we'll get the value the user enters, but the label is just static. We create it once, we don't change it. So for this we need an entry class, tk.entry. This refers to the login frame, so it's based on that frame. And that's about it. We also add grid, row 0, column 1 for that. Sticky, let's keep it EW, east, west. Let me show you what we have. So, username and the field. So the frame is a grid, and it contains rows and columns. The first row is occupied by username and the entry. Now, username occupies a cell and the field occupies its own cell. With west, you say that username should occupy the left side of the cell, while east-west, meaning the widget will stretch the entire length of the cell. So the cell starts here and ends here, but then we have this 10 units of padding, which we defined in this, pad X, pad Y. So that's the idea. You can experiment with these parameters if you like. Let's move on to the next lines. So I'll copy that code, and this will be the password. Let's say password with capital P, and the row will be 1 this time. This will be entry password, and it's the same, but row 1, column 1, so it's the next row but the same column, east west as well. So this is what we've got. Looks fine. Let's continue with the other frame. So this was the login frame. So we divide everything by frames. This was the frame we just created. Now it's the form submission frame, so the other widgets. For this we'll create a self.form frame attribute equal to tk.frame, again self.root, just like here. Let's close that, and then the same code goes for that as well. Self.form frame.pack, and then let's define the labels and the other widgets. So I'll copy some code. tk.label form frame text full name grid 0 column 0. So 0 0 because it's a new frame, so the counting resets. And then entry username, let's call this entry full name. Form frame again, column 1 row 0, that's okay. Let's do the same for the email field. So form frame, that would be email, and row 1 this time, entry email, tk entry form frame, that's okay. Column row 1, column 1. Next would be current address. So that here is current address. It's the third row, so that would be 2 here. And this is entry current underscore address row 2. And lastly we have permanent address. So permanent 3 here and 3 there. Let's execute, and this is the result so far, so it's looking good. Next we have these 2 buttons, submit and close browser. Let's define them as well. So we're still inside the init method here, right? Everything should be initialized when the program starts. So buttons, self.button frame could be a variable we create here, tk.frame. So it's a third frame, right? We have 2 frames so far, the form frame, the login frame, and the button frame. Self.button frame.pack, and we enter the same attributes here as well. And then tk.button, self.button frame, we reference that frame. We give some text to the button like submit, and then the button should do something, right? Should have a command argument which points to self.submit data. So this method here, which we will implement later. But don't call that method like this, just reference that method, just the name of the method with self before. So the button will take care of executing, of calling that method when it's pressed by the user. And grid, this would be row 0 column 0 because it's a new frame. We can add a pad x of 5 for the button, so the area around the button. And I'll duplicate this line, and this will be a close browser button, self.close browser method, which is down here, but remove the brackets so that it's not called automatically, and this would be row 0 column 1. So that's it. I can execute the script, and this is the interface. Of course, now this doesn't do anything because we haven't implemented anything. We simply have pass here in this function. So let's implement this method. So what does the submit data do? Well, first it grabs the content the user enters in these fields. So in all these, username, password, and so on, and it stores that each of these texts in a variable, and then it calls the login methods and the fill form method of the web automation class. So let's implement that here. Let's grab the content from the user fields. So let's create a username variable with self.entry username .get. This is how you get the username. Actually, I can print it out just for you to see what's going on. So run GUI. If I write something here, I press submit. We got an error, non-type object has no attribute get. So let's see why we got that. This is why. Because when you want to store the entry in a variable, you should separate this from that, because this way, whatever grid returns, which in this case it's a non-object, so the output of that method will be stored in this variable. So you can do chain methods in here because we don't need to store anything in variables, but we shouldn't do it here. So I'll cut that out and then say self.entry username and add that grid there. So now we store the entry in entry username, and then we can, this time we can grab the content successfully. And you'll see it printed out in here by the print function we just added. So we need to do this with every other method. So we cut that self.entry password. With full name as well. Full name, add that. For entry email as well. So self.entry email, add that. Current address. Current address. And finally, permanent address. .grid. Right, with that, we can get the contents of the other fields. Passwords, it's next self.entry password .get. Let's duplicate that. The next one is a full name. So entry full name. Then we have email, entry email. And then we have current address, entry current address, and lastly we have permanent address, entry permanent address. And then once we have these strings, this text, the fields entered by the user, we want to initialize the web automation class from our other file, web automation. For that, we need to import, or you can say from main import web automation. So main is the name of the file and web automation is the name of the class, which contains all the code for Selenium. And then you need to initialize web automation is equal to web automation, the class. So to initialize it, let me split it to the right. And to initialize that, we can see here how we did it previously. So just like this, we initialize it, and then web automation Actually, let's store it in a self variable to make it an attribute so it can be accessed by other methods of the class, and then self.webautomation.login. Now here we pass the username, this one, which we get from the user, and the password. So we log in the user with those fields. And just after that, we access the webautomation.fillForm method, which is this method here of the web automation class, which will fill in the form and submit it. And here we pass full name, comma, email in the correct order, current address, permanent address. So that. Let's execute it, but before we do that, I want to go to the entry field, entry for the password. So here, this one here, entry password is equal to entry, and then add a show attribute, which is equal to this string with an asterisk, which will hide the password when the user types it in the GUI. Let's try it. So that's the GUI, username, password, you see it's hidden, full name, John Smith, john@gmail.com, and let's add some sample data for that. Submit. So the browser was opened very quickly and the data was submitted successfully, as you can see here. So the login and everything happened quite fast. Now let's close the browser because this button doesn't work for now. So let's go to the close browser method and point to self.webautomation, the web automation instance we created here, and then to the close method of that, which is this one here, the close method of the other script. And if you like, you can say something like message box. We can import a message box from tkinter import message box, so a prompt to tell the user that everything was successful. So message box.show info submitted successfully. Let's try this. Username, password, john@gmail.com, xxyy, submit. The browser is open, the data are submitted successfully, and we can close the browser. We didn't see the message because that actually is, if you see this method, it has two, a title and a message. The first argument is the title of the window. So we can say browser closed, and this will be the message shown on the window. Another last time using this program, and we're done with this video. So I filled in the data, I press submit, the browser opens, everything works fine. Close browser, the browser closes, and this is the message submitted successfully. So that's a program, and that's how to use Selenium and tkinter as well. And this was also a great example on how to use object-oriented programming. You see, it has a lot of code, but it does make the code more robust, and you can extend it easier. Now you can just add more methods, and you don't affect the other part of the code because everything is enclosed in its own methods. So submit data is here, close browser is here, and so on. I hope this helps, and thanks a lot for following. See you later.